Hey everyone, it's Ellis, and this is going to be a champion first impressions video. It's been a while since I got to do one of these. This one is on Neeko, the Curious Chameleon. So we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to take a look at her abilities. Q, Blooming Burst. Neeko propels a seed into a target area, which blooms and damages enemies if the burst kills an enemy champion or damages a champion or a large monster. It will bloom again up to 2 times. So we play this. And that's fine. So the thing here is that Neeko. I'm gonna come back to the Q a little bit later on. Actually, let me talk about the passive really quick. I want to talk about her other abilities before I talk about why the Q is the way that it is. Passive, Inherent Glamour. Neeko can disguise herself to appear as an ally champion. Damaging or taking damage from an enemy champion or casting either Blooming Burst or Tangle Barbs breaks the illusion and increases the cooldown. So I actually don't know what the base cooldown is on it, but nonetheless, this is actually a really, really cool ability. And obviously, I don't know how long it lasts. Like, I don't know how long the illusion lasts, but this could be actually legitimately really powerful for faking out opponents and certain stages of the game, depending on vision control. And obviously, this can be a menace instead of solo queue. W, Shapeshifter. Passive. Every third basic attack resonates with spiritual energy, dealing bonus magic damage and briefly increasing Neeko's movement speed. Active Neeko briefly slips out of sight, becoming invisible, gaining movement speed, and sending a temporary clone of her current form, splitting in a chosen direction. Is she ranged? I actually don't know if she's ranged. I'm assuming that she's melee. E, Tangle Barbs. Neeko slings a magical spiral in a direction, damaging and briefly rooting enemies. It passes through. The last champion hit is rooted longer. If Tangle Barbs hits at least 2 enemies, it grows in size, speed, and root duration. Okay. And then R, Pop Blossom. Neeko begins charging herself with spiritual essence. A moment later, she leaps into the air, gains a shield, and slows nearby enemies, releasing energy upon landing to massively damage and stun enemies in the area. When disguised by Inherent Glamour, enemies won't see Neeko's initial charge up. So now coming back to the Blooming Burst. So the immediate thought is, where does Neeko belong? Does Neeko belong as a support, as a top laner, as a mid laner, as a jungle? And I think that a lot of people look at her and they think to themselves, oh, well, Q Blooming Burst looks really good, especially if you can just auto-attack one of the small wraiths or one of the small wolves and then get it really low after the first Q, Blooming Burst, and then you kill it, and then it AoEs and it hits all the other ones, and then that one, you cast another Q, and then it pops again, and it helps you kill the large monster. And obviously, I think that's really good for wolves, wraiths, and then Krugs as well. So I think that this is really good. Jungle looks like it's most likely going to be the primary role, especially when you consider the passive, the Inherent Glamour, being able to swap as the champion, come out of brushes or something, and I don't know. There's obviously some tricky plays. They have like the playing as Neeko thing down here where Renekton walks into a brush, but this is scripted because Camille, forgets that Renekton has a stun. You'll see what I'm talking about. Camille trades against Renekton. Renekton goes into the brush. Another Renekton comes out, and then Camille walks up and begs herself to just get stunned and then chased by Slice and Dice. So it doesn't really matter. So this instance doesn't really showcase, actually, the power of Neeko's passive. There is definitely going to be more powerful gameplay that can be utilized by the passive, but unless it ends up doing something else, I think that this could actually be problematic. I think that maybe her passive is going to need something more in the future for the highest levels of play. I think this is stronger at the lower levels, although I think in synergy with the split thing, the shape splitter, this is where I guess it gets really good. If you have 3 targets on one screen, but then it's only going to last temporarily. The E Tangle Barbs is really cool. I don't know what her AP ratios are on everything. Twitch chat has told me that it's 1.3 on her ultimate, and her ultimate is really powerful. So with the clear speed of the Q, the movement speed that she can get with Shape Splitter, slips out of sight can result in sending a temporary clone of her current form sprinting in a chosen direction. She doesn't have any terrain scaling. That's one of the big concerns for me, is because usually junglers will have terrain scaling if they're good. One of the main exceptions to this right now is Xin Zhao, but Xin Zhao is very fast and very oppressive, and he's able to destroy so many champions in the game right now. With Tangle Barbs, if Tangle Barbs hits at least 2 enemies, it grows in size, speed, and root duration. Neeko slings magical and damaging and briefly rooting enemies. So, I mean, she has a root on her, so it's similar to Elise in a way, and I guess it's a mage jungler that we have been lacking. She has 550 range, so maybe it just ends up being a mid laner. She could just end up being a mid, but if she ends up being a mid in the current meta, it looks something like Zoe, I'm assuming, because the E is very similar. When facing off against melee champions, you're just going to root them in place and then try to hit them. The W is almost entirely useless inside of laning phase, except for the 3-hit passive. But I don't know what her auto attack speed is, and given that she's 550, maybe it ends up putting her in top lane or something. So I want to see all of her ratios before I can decide where she's going to end up going. Obviously, cooldown is going to be one of the main factors that you have to consider when deciding where she's going to go because of the way that she can itemize and whatnot. She does look really strong with the E and the R, but the rest of her kit, like the W is something that can be played around and it can be beat. And the slips out of sight, becoming invisible, gaining movement speed, etc. This is like it's adding the mobility of like a Zoe, or it's adding the slipperiness of a Zoe has, and we already have Zoe inside of the game. You look at the range on the Q, it doesn't look that long, although maybe she can throw it further and it's just not showing it. I don't know how far she can throw the Q. The Q is obviously probably going to be relatively good poke. The R is okay. But it does mean that she has to get down and dirty. The shield is actually quite massive, and the AP ratio does look quite big. So I think that this is a champion that it can come down to her ratios. If she has really low cooldowns, high base damage, which means that she doesn't have as much of a reliance on items, then she can actually bully the laning phase very early on, or as a jungler, she can clear camps really fast and offer a lot of assistance. And again, if she has high base scaling, then she doesn't have a requirement on itemization, which further incentivizes her to be inside of the jungle due to the naturally low economy. But 550 range is notable. Maybe some people are wondering if she can just end up being a support or something. The thing with support is that, again, the W isn't, I think, valuable enough. The Q is almost then not effective. The passive doesn't matter at that point. Unless you're going to end up doing roams in the mid-game or the early into mid-game transition. Tangle Barbs is valuable, and then R is, I guess, valuable. But I'm thinking, just from first impressions, that she's most likely just going to be mid, then jungle. I want to say jungle, then mid. And the reason that I want to say jungle, then mid is because of her passive and because of her W. I think that it just wouldn't be utilized as well. Bonus, like, and also third basic attack resonates spiritual enemy. It doesn't say that it's only against champions. So it's looking like maybe jungle, but apparently, according to Twitch chat, Riot is claiming mid support, which I don't like when Riot does stuff like that. Maybe, is she on PBE? I don't know. Twitch chat's not telling me if she's on PBE. Oh, they said jungle is fine. Okay. Her kit is looking like jungle to me, and then mid. Kit is looking like jungle and then mid. The problem is that she has no theme. And this is something that's concerning, because when we do the first impressions about Akali, when we do it about Aatrox, when we do it about Zoe, when we do it about all these champions like Ornn and whatnot, the champion tends to have a theme. The problem here is that, living up to her name, she truly is a chameleon. Thinking of like Chameleon from the Mortal Kombat series, where she has a little bit of everything, but unless it's oppressive, it's not gonna be good enough. Like, we can look at champions that have a little bit of everything, and we think to ourselves, oh man, that's great. They actually just have everything, and this is why older champions tend to suck. But this champion will come down to her numbers. Because if the Q just doesn't deal enough damage, her E is not going to be as strong, depending on its range and then its reliance, as other champions in the game. The W is not going to be as effective. as some other champions inside of the game. So a lot of it comes down to her ratios and her cooldown, and I know that I've echoed this statement a few times now during these first impressions. But I don't know. And every time I see a champion like this, I do actually get very worried. And the reason that I get worried is because she's balanced by her numbers rather than her kit. If her numbers are even remotely acceptable, then she'll probably always be viable, just because her kit does have so much inside of it. But if they're even remote, it's sort of like walking the Kassadin line, where if the numbers are too broken, then she's just not fair. But if the numbers are too bad, then she just never gets picked, because there's other champions that will offer more with less risk and higher reward. So I think that is pretty much it. It's looking like she's a jungler. That's where I'm assuming that she's going to end up. Hopefully I'll be able to see her ratios soon, what her base MS is, because that's one of the key important things for understanding where she goes inside of the jungle. And then obviously her cooldowns, because if her cooldown's very low on her W, this is really, really good for running across the map. Really sad that she can't dash through anything, so she doesn't have terrain scaling. That would actually make her so much more powerful. Again, the passive, I really hope that there's something else to her passive and it's not just becoming a clone of a teammate. Because if it's just becoming a clone of a teammate, she basically doesn't have a passive at higher level play, which is what's really sad. The R is really, really cool, but again, what are her ratios? Because you can't just decide to run in and cast R. Maybe you can cast R after Wing and whatnot, but we'll have to wait to see. I do like how she looks. I'm excited that we do finally have a new champion. It seems like there's only 2 skins. I do think the skin actually looks really cool. But there's no more playing with Neeko stuff. It's just a 12-second clip, which is really sad. Copying an ally with melee or shorter range is sneaky, set up for Tangle Barbs and Blooming Burst combo. You'll catch foes who think they're at a safe distance. I mean, I guess one of the things here is if you can copy the teammate's MS and everything, maybe there's value here, especially depending on how long the passive lasts. Like, for instance, if your support has mobility boots and you don't, and you get to copy them and get the mobility boots or something, you can run around the map faster. But I think that's pretty much it. That's all for my first impressions on Neeko. This doesn't affect me as much because I'm so afraid of what it means to have a kit like this and how reliant it is on numbers. I'm expecting that Riot wants to sell stuff, and I'm assuming that there's probably actually quite a bit of hype around this champ because we just haven't had a new champion in a while. We've had some reworks and stuff, and this actually does just look like a cool mage that a lot of people will hate. And I am a huge fan of Zoe-type champions. And what I mean by that is champions that are just completely ass-busted with ratios and cause a lot of not fun for the... or they make it so that their opponent doesn't get to have a lot of fun. And I hope that's what ends up happening here. So that's it.